distinguished panel today, and I guess we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've just raised this morning, which shape Auckland's growth. Where are these people going to go? These people are all arriving in Auckland. So there's been a number of strategies, ideas, and documents that have been circulating, especially last year, that have been coming up with some kinds of ideas of how we're going to accommodate Auckland's growth, what shape it's going to take. So I guess maybe if we can think of it in a kind of slogan, it would be, what are the limits? What are the limits of Auckland's growth? And so I'm going to ask our panel to talk a little bit about that, to address that kind of idea, that notion. Should there be a limit? If so, what shape will that limit take? What would govern that limit? Or don't we need limits? We should just let Auckland grow wherever. So I guess our panel are going to ask the panel to maybe talk for 5 minutes about that kind of subject, and then we're going to open up the discussion. And this morning we have been joined with a very distinguished group of individuals, starting with David Cleland. And David's one of the, at Auckland City, he's one of the architects of the Auckland Plan. The Auckland Plan is something that's going to affect us all. It's going to affect all your practice. And so he's been developing ideas about how the city's going to grow and how the city could be contained. And so David's a very important player in this process, so we're really grateful that he come along. Rachel Lambert. Rachel is Director of Boffin-Miskell, New Zealand's largest landscape architects. And Rachel was instrumental in setting up Boffin-Miskell in Auckland a long time ago, and so and Rachel's been incredibly part of the whole issue of Auckland's growth the last 10-20 years, and so incredibly knowledgeable, and it's really interesting having a landscape architect that's been so embedded in this kind of process. So Rachel's a very important player in this process. We're really happy to make it. Conal Townsend is Chairman of the Property Council. Chief Executive of the Property Council in Auckland, and Conal's got very strong views about how Auckland's going to grow, the future shape of Auckland, which he's going to talk about, and Bob Townsend, Bob Day. Bob Day's kind of property development guru. He's kind of the prophet of where things are going to happen in Auckland. Has a very influential newsletter, incredibly connected to the Auckland scene, and if you don't read his newsletter, it's almost like a kind of crystal ball of what's going to happen in Auckland. So very interesting analysis and thinker about Auckland. Finally, Professor Wagonovich, Dushko's Professor of Urban Design at Unitec, and has been very interested in the whole area of sustainable urbanism. In fact, one of the world's leading experts in the connection of eco-technology and urban design, and a real model to all of us, I think, of how an academic should be. He's a real voice of academia, and contributes to the tirelessly to the Herald, to the newspaper, to television, to cultural commentators about urban design issues, how Auckland should grow. So he's an amazing asset to Unitec, and really original, interesting thinker about urbanism in Auckland. So they're people we've got today. Fantastic panel. So I urge you to make full use of them. And Hannah is so Hannah, you can introduce yourself as part of the panel. Yeah.
Hannah DeProse, and I'm working with Conal Townsend at the Property Council, and I am his advisor on communication issues, and obviously there's a lot of communications running the Auckland Plan that's being out in the media at the moment, and obviously to make sure that everything gets said the right way.
Oh, I should interrupt and say that yesterday, mumbled to my left here, she's the spin doctor in
Yeah.
You can trust her.
Sorry, I should have.
So if you say anything slightly inappropriate, Hannah will leap in.
I should should have introduced you. Yeah, obviously Connell's minder. So still limits.
The rest is mine.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe without further ado, we'll kick off, and if it's okay, David, we'll kind of go down and sort of side of the table, and yeah, so maybe 5 minutes about Auckland growth, Auckland limits. Then clock down.
Just left all my maps outside. I'll be back in a minute.
Thanks, Matthew. So I don't really want to sort of focus on the Auckland plan. It's sort of like the fact that I'm living and breathing it. It's kind of hard for me to say anything without thinking about the Auckland plan at the moment. But in terms of limits, we are we've been working very closely, for example, with the Property Council and members of the development community, as well as all the other important parts of the wider Auckland community, to come up with a sense of what we need to say about limits to growth, how we apply limits. And I guess I probably see that limits are important around the big things. We don't want to have limits that are unnecessary. I think Auckland's got a proud tradition of doing creative things and being in the Kiwi spirit, sort of innovators, and the whole idea of a person's home as their castle, and and there should be a fair degree of freedom for people to do what they want where they want. So it's around those big things, and the risk if we don't have some limits that we end up with consequences possibly foreseen or unforeseen that we don't want. And so it's really about those big moves. It's about the big things like, really where do we want the next million people to be living, and in a way that we're pretty confident that we can give certainty around the things that they need, those fundamental things they need on a day-to-day basis in terms of critical infrastructure, access to critical services and that kind of thing. It's a real balancing act because we can't predict the future. We can try and guess what the future might look like, and there are certainly some things that are pretty reliable as ideas of change, the effect of technology, and the increasing freedom that gives us to do a whole range of things in different ways and in different places at different times. So we've really got to get that balance out between the sort of the building blocks of the city, the things that really materially important to the city that need to be in certain places as opposed to other places, and get those right, but not stifle, I suppose, all those little things, those little decisions, or those decisions that individual people or individual companies can and should continue to make in their own right or their own way, unconstrained by an overly heavy bureaucratic hand. I guess that's what I'd say. It's a balancing act, but you do need some limits.
So David, if I can just jump in. So I'm not sure if all the students kind of understand what the sort of the idea about the AUBs are at the moment.
Okay. So I'll take it a bit further. You'll probably be familiar with the status quo in terms of regional planning has this thing called metropolitan urban limit, and it's been the subject of considerable debate. It was a device used by Auckland Regional Council to try and control growth at the margins of the city. We, the Auckland Council, working with all the other stakeholders in forming the Auckland Plan, consider that the metropolitan urban limit concept had some merits, but the way it was applied was not sufficiently forward-looking. And so you'll see in the Auckland Plan when it comes out in about a month, as a result of all of the feedback and the submissions and the further work we've been doing with the development industry, we're putting forward the idea of a rural-urban boundary, which is rather than a control device for managing growth, it's really about saying where can we define those long-term limits to growth, and working within that, how are we going to manage in a rational way the staging and releasing of land within what is really a 2040 kind of limit to growth. And that 2040 limit needs to be defined in places where we think we have the best overall fit in terms of the ability to provide infrastructure, the ability to have people living in reasonable proximity to jobs, in places where we're not severely constrained by either environmental or these limits, the rural urban boundary is really about growth of fringes. It's really about saying we do need some limits because we need to give some certainty to the providers of the big infrastructure, to the providers of critical government services and education, long-term planning around where we're going to have schools and those sorts of things. But it needs to be sufficiently forward-looking that we can do some seriously big moves within that limit, rather than saying we're going to move it here, then we might move it a bit further, then we might move it a bit further, which is sort of the approach with the metropolitan urban limit. The metropolitan urban limit didn't really give you a sense of what's the long-term urban form that we're actually working towards. And so it is a different sort of limit, but we think it's a little bit more practical. It allows us to, working with communities and the industry, development industry, make some big moves that are properly planned and working on creating some, I suppose, viable whole communities rather than just the sort of incremental growth of the margins.
And so what are the criteria that you've established to make these limits?
The criteria are partly about big infrastructure, so water, water supply, wastewater, transport, obviously. So it makes sense for us to grow in those areas where we're going to have a reasonable chance of providing reasonably good public transport. We, at the same time, realise that not all growth should or can be just further building on the existing core area. And so we've identified that there are two significant satellite towns, north and south, and that's Warkworth and Pukekohe, and a number of other rural towns and what we call rural and coastal towns that will also take a degree of growth. And so the rural urban boundary won't just apply to the core urban area, you know, the closest to the north, west, south, and whatever of the core urban area. It's also how we're going to grow around those big towns that are starting to develop and get some clarity around how much growth do we think is appropriate for those towns. How can we manage it and stage it and release it in a rational way over time?
So there's a kind of a limit, you're conceptualising a limit, a line around Auckland, but then outside that will be...
Yeah, so Auckland is a polycentric community already, where we're not trying to suggest every... we have a vision which has really come from the community. The community has said they support the idea of a quality compact Auckland, which means we want as much growth as possible to be in places where we've already built. We want our existing built environment to diversify, intensify, but in a quality way, in a way that actually delivers really good outcomes for existing communities and the people and the businesses who will locate in these existing areas in the future. And that means making better use of our existing urban environment, but inevitably there will be a significant amount of growth that can't fit inside the existing urban areas. We need to find the best place for it outside the core area. So the existing towns beyond the core area, those things we call satellite towns, rural and coastal towns, and all the spaces in between will take a significant degree of growth. And it's probably in the order of between 30 and 40% of future dwellings will be outside what we call that core area.
Should we have questions or shall we move to the end?
Thank you. I just put these acronyms on the board. They might be new to some people. So we were talking about MULs and RUVs. Is that correct? And they're not exactly the same thing, right?
No.
And then I think the concept of intensification or densification was important too.
And satellite.
Complexity, of course. Oh, yeah. Quality, complexity.
And rural and coastal towns have a really important role to play as well.
Rural and coastal towns.
And then there's a whole lot of other things between those spaces that are various forms of rural or coastal type.
Metropolitan urban limits, rural urban boundary.
Okay, maybe, yeah, Rachel.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess just in a sort of philosophical principle sense to start off with, I mean, I guess I'm a strong supporter of a quality compact city. You know, Auckland has grown, and then with the recent amalgamation of the cities has become one very large, as David said, polycentric, so lots of centres within one city. And you know, we clearly need to define what that is and just not allow it to just keep on doing what it did when it started growing in the 60s, just kind of eating up the countryside and just getting bigger and bigger because it's easy to build on the edge. So I think the principle of there being some form of limit that says, well, this is the compact city and we will try and densify, so grow some of our growth inside that area, and use that increased density to get better services around public transport and community facilities, all those things. So that's kind of principle number one, and it kind of a wee bit goes without saying, but it's important to say. Having said that, I think Auckland is going to also have to grow outside the MUL or the RUB, whatever you call it, and the question around, you know, how we do that well in a better way than Auckland spread its great morass is a kind of really good question, and it's a great question for you to be looking at now as part of the studio. I think landscape is something that should inform how that growth happens. I think, you know, in the future we should all be a big part of determining how Auckland grows well, outside, inside as well, but particularly outside the MUL or RUB. That's both because some landscape should be protected from growth, like there shouldn't be growth and change, so that we all as residents of the city have great places that are rural and coastal to use as part of our recreational lifestyle and part of our amenity, the fact that we do live in a big city. So, you know, we should be part of determining which areas are no-go for future residential growth, as well as saying, okay, now if we understand landscape as a driver, how do we determine where we can grow, either expanding the existing towns and settlements, as David identified, you know, Pukekohe, Warkworth, and then all of the smaller satellites, and even where could there be new places that we create settlement to accommodate Auckland's growth over time. And using the landscape tools that you'll use through GIS and an understanding of kind of the pattern of landscape, and then the infrastructure pattern that supports that, you know, roads, electricity, water, all the things that we need to kind of live to sort of understand those two things and determine, you know, how we should grow well outside of the MUL. I think Auckland lost an opportunity to have a really good greenbelt MUL. You know, like you'll know cities that have, Christchurch is one of those examples, that have a proper, you get to the edge of the town and it's rural, it's proper rural, it's not lifestyle. And I think, you know, some of our past policies created a really low density urbanism, rural lifestyle outside of the city, and it's kind of lost that opportunity to have a proper rural greenbelt. I think it would be, I'd like to see an Auckland grow that says, where we do grow outside the MUL, keep some density around that, make it tighter rather than this kind of, you know, low density. Everybody has a great big house and a great big swimming pool, and then some land they don't know what to do with, and they poorly manage it, and it's not productive as a resource because land's too valuable to be, you know, wasting for people to grow a couple of sheep and then not know what to do with the rest of their land and mow it every weekend, and then come back to the city because they can't stand living in a rural environment. So I think, you know, density around how we grow outside the MUL is really important, so that we're not wasting land to accommodate people is a critical thing, and I think it'd be interesting for you to kind of look at some different forms of denser settlement outside the MUL. So I think that's probably
very good. That's very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
Property Council, ladies and gentlemen, represents an often misunderstood innocent group of people. International property investors and developers. These fine men and women have a vision for the built environment. I find myself in a difficult situation of totally agreeing with David and Rachel on the fundamental points they put forward. So let me spice it up for you a little bit by just putting some contra thoughts in front of you so you can get a bit of a bounce back of ideas. David's got a crucial role to play, and the Property Council has been working closely with him and his colleagues on developing the Auckland plan, and it's gone really well. And we think we've got a pretty good-looking document that's going to come out now that's pretty realistic and well-rooted in empirical facts. Back in the early 19th century, there was a French philosopher with the name of Auguste Comte, C-O-M-P-T. He was the founder of sociology, or the study of society, and he coined a really nice idea about the way society works. He said demographics is destiny. What he meant, population of people is the future. The key thing for the members of my organisation is how we create jobs for them, and particularly how we create buildings that they're going to work in, or shop in, or play in, or live in terms of their houses, shopping centres, offices, factories and warehouses and so on. Now that's our core business. I need to declare first up that the Property Council, we represent the developers of terraced houses and apartments. So I agree with my friends here that density is important, and we're the organisation who represents the developers of that dense housing. But we also have a small number of our members as suburban land developers. They're the ones who take the green fields, put in the curb and channel, put in the power cables, and actually develop those, what we used to think as quarter-acre sections. But we think there's a whole lot of much cleverer ways of thinking about building on the outskirts now. It's back to Rachel's point. As a society, we cannot afford to have huge quarter-acre sections, or even acres with a couple of sheep or an alpaca out the back that might look cute to show your friends on a Saturday afternoon, but really isn't all that useful use of land. So we are about thinking much more cleverly about things. David made the point, we're faced with population. You talked about being 1 million new people, actually, didn't you, really over a sort of 30-year period, and that's probably about, I don't know, roughly, I think we'll agree, something like 600,000 new housing units have got to go in the next 3 decades. 3 decades, believe it or not, will go by really, really fast. The older one gets, the more one realise this is an eternal truth. And that's a hell of a lot of people. So that's the population of Greater Christchurch and the population of Greater Wellington that we've got to either fit in within the existing MUL or within a newly configured rural-urban boundary of some kind. Passionate proponents of MULs tend to be very preoccupied with rural ecosystems and preserving the rural environment, and that's entirely laudable and sensible. But at the same time, having an MUL or an RUB does create certain perverse, unintended consequences that you need to be very aware of. It is a true thing about economics that when you artificially control the supply of a product or commodity, the price goes up. When you artificially control the supply of land, the price goes up, and it becomes inevitably, like night follows day, captured in the final sale price of a house. And we just can't escape that. The Property Council takes a kind of a medium sort of position on this. There are people around in New Zealand, I won't mention names, but one fellow who lives in Christchurch is a regular correspondent, who advocates basically, there is a God, God gave us green grass exists to put in curb and channel, just keep on rolling. Now, the argument being it will keep the price of land down, therefore it will reduce poverty because it will give everyone a chance to own their own home. Very seductive argument, but actually pretty dodgy, because there's the price of transport to get into town to work. There's a whole lot of other costs of infrastructure you've got to put in across those green fields. You've got to weigh that up. And those are the sort of things that David's sort of juggling with all the time. On the other hand, the counter-argument is let's preserve the rural ecosystems, have a completely ruthless MUL, and think of it more like a Chinese wall with machine gun posts on it that no one will ever allow to cross. That way we'll preserve the rural ecosystem, but the price will be, of course, constraining the availability of land, we're driving the price up, we're increasing poverty, and making it, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, impossible for you to own your own home. There's the logical concomitant. Now you've got two opposing poles there. Surely somewhere in the middle is a viable, workable plan. And I think that's actually what David's coming up with, that we've got something now that's pretty viable and funky and is going to come to work. So that's our position. We're after a medium point. Morning. What sort of how do you call this? Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by one of New Zealand's finest property investors and developers here. A fine, outstanding man. Noticed for his passion and vision, if not for his timeliness. Couldn't resist that.
Great name.
So let me just summarise. We've got to find that optimal point between that economic issue of controlling the land and driving the price up, and we've also got to think about the costs that then come with sort of uncontrolled sprawl in the form of infrastructure and transport costs and all those sort of things. That is the challenge we're facing. The difficulty we also face in Auckland, though, is there are a couple of quite tricky legal problems. An awful lot of houses are what's called cross-leased. I don't know if that's the concept issue we want to throw up on the board, but the problem is you used to have a big quarter-acre section, the person who owned the house split it off, built a house behind, sold it, but rather than pay the legal fees, they did a quick and dirty legal title, they cross-leased it. So the house in front, half owns the house behind, the house behind owns the house in front. You know, if we're going to move towards density, we've got to untangle these awful legal cross-lease things. And it does make achieving the highly dense plan extremely difficult, because everyone then's got the right of veto over the person in front selling and saying, yeah, sure, we'll put up a 20-storey apartment block. The single house behind who has that cross-lease says, I veto it, it's off. So there's a lot of legal issues like that. The other final thought I've got for you is terraced houses and apartments. Apartments sit on quite a small amount of land, a small footprint if you will, and go up into the air. Banks lend money, put a mortgage over something, and they want to know they get their money back, which is not unreasonable probably. But they want security. They want to know that if the person defaults on their loan, they're going to get the house or the building or the apartments back. The problem with apartments is often they're controlled by a thing called the Unit Titles Act. What that means is the individual owner owns their apartment, but all of the owners collectively own the skin of the building, if you will, and often the land. Banks hate it, because with the Unit Titles Act, they don't get security. The risk for them that the thing might fall over is very, very high, and they're very reluctant to lend. Or if they do lend, they expect you all to put in maybe 40% of the total development cost right up front. That's a very high threshold. It makes it extremely difficult to get apartments off the ground. And people like Brady Nixon here know so much more about the costs involved in developing apartments. They're tricky things to get off the ground. So we're in favour of greater density, but we need to be aware that in terms of the microeconomics of it, this is not an easy business to get off and make work. So I've taken a slightly different tack. I totally agree with Rachel about urban design. We're passionate supporters of that. If we do density, it's got to be high quality and not horrible, ratty little apartments that people would rather splash their own wrists and live on or poke their own eyes out with sticks. There's too much of that sort of rubbish around Auckland, and I think the three of us are sitting united on being deeply worried about that, I think. Sorry, I'm probably wasting now, guys, but yeah, that's probably enough.
Of the profit?
First up, I take it from the discussion we've been having that you know where the present MUL is and where the new RUB might be, or do you not?
No.
You don't. Okay, so in the north, across the west, just above here, the boundary used to be between the Greenhithe Bridge, heading across towards the end of the North-Western Motorway at Massey North, where Westgate now is. Yep, have that piece. And in the north, above the North Shore, you get up to Long Bay, and that's the boundary there, and then you've got Rachel's Little Creek now. Before you get to the Hibiscus Coast and the Whamapara Peninsula. and that's a little piece of MUL area, and then Walkworth is a little piece of MUL area, and Wellsford is another one, and Townsville is another one. And so those that are in the north, those are the lines of the existing MUL in the north. In the south, you get down Manukau, East Tamaki Way, so you go across from Manukau City, the old Manukau City Centre, and you go across towards the east coast, towards the Gulf. You go along the ridge, above East Tamaki, above Danamora, and there's a line along there which says no development beyond this line here. And then down the other side you've got a bit of water which tells you where the line is. There's a few. Pukekohe is one of those little MUL dots in the past. Going back over the last decade or so, the regional council was effectively in control of the MUL. Territorial councils, the 7 of them within the Auckland region, could apply to enlarge the MUL for specific areas, and developers could apply as well to enlarge the MUL, which they did. It was a process which was probably the most successful way of making anybody bust over a 10-year period, guaranteed bust, because nothing was going to happen but you spend an awful lot of money. There's a fellow who owned a piece of land on both sides of the MUL at Hatfields Beach, and wanted to develop beyond the MUL on about 3 hectares. Wanted to develop some houses. He got the plan change, the extension of that MUL little piece, end of last year. It took him 10 years. I know that most people think there must be another 3 hectares in this world where I can develop some houses. I should go and find him. He stuck with it and he finally got it. The ARC, the regional council, was determined to prevent these little incremental pieces of growth. So that was one. Around Henderson, there are others. There's a vineyard just up the road from Henderson, and that took about 7 or 8 years to turn into urban land against the wishes of the regional council. So over the last decade or so, it's been possible to expand, but you have to have a huge fight to achieve it. And of course, having a huge fight is expensive. Defeats the purpose of trying to develop on cheaper land. Across the northwest of Auckland, where the Greenhearth Bridge went down into what used to be a reasonably quick road to drive across, until everybody put their driveways out into it. And so every house all the way across from Greenhearth to Massey to Westgate had a driveway, and a lot of pensioners were on there, so they would come out for their paid drive and get home around about sometime the next day, because get old and get lost. But they managed to prevent traffic from travelling at anything like 30 k's an hour across the top of the harbour. So you added a bit of congestion to life in the northwest, as well as the fact that you couldn't do it beyond these things. Now you have a new motorway across the top with some very pretty bridges and lovely designs. And that's outside the old MUL, as you can see it. And the normal thing with motorways is that they're put there as a rapid link between busy places, and people are inclined to build up to the edge and over the edge, and you build on both sides. That's fairly normal, this sort of road. The MUL theory is that you don't go just building up to these places, and so that motorway is beyond the MUL, which will be taken around. But in due course, the people who want to develop them encroach on a little piece of land, a strip between, will manage to do so. Maybe less of a fight now because it's a sensitive thing to do. They'll also want to build a little bit beyond on the other side of the road because of what you do. Flipping over to the south of Auckland, to the ridge above East Tamaki and Dannemora, have been developers trying to expand beyond the MUL for about a decade, and gradually getting lifestyle blocks in place. There's a few there with X-farms and about 50 odd lifestyle blocks of various forms, and that's been the first step of expanding, because the ARC had more difficulty opposing that sort of growth. On this side of Auckland, you've got Coatesville, where 10-acre blocks, 4-hectare blocks were developed in a similar lifestyle system. Over the last 6-7 years or so, people have been cutting those in half down to 2-hectare blocks, and then again starting to cut back down to 1-hectare blocks, because a lot of them haven't worked out how to deal with those sheep that eventually sold them. There is actually an easy method, because there's a vineyard still on at Lionburners Bay. Or there's a winery at Lionburners Bay, no vineyard anymore. There's a few sheep there. And the neighbours around that area, which is near the Whenuapai and airbase, Hudsonville airbase, worked out that you'd have a livestock block, you'd have a bunch of sheep between half a dozen of you. You put a gate in the back fence and from the sheep, when you sick of it, I sheep next door. And the sheep are quite used to doing this, so the livestock blocks could be sort of communally operated livestock blocks, but only very slowly. I've talked to people for years in planning in Auckland about satellites, and I talked to Roswell, Warkworth in the north, Helensville as natural satellites. But going further afield, you look at Whangarei and Marsden Point as a satellite of the big beast, and you look at Hamilton and Tauranga as commercial satellites, and you can look across to the coast to Waihi and up to places like Kowaka or Magarota, a little bit north. There's rural satellites, and so you can develop those into areas which might have an urban boundary rather than a big, don't grow any bigger. In the last decade, the Regional Council of Auckland has opposed to any development outside the MUL, which wasn't actually its role and wasn't the role of the MUL. The role was to set a boundary but to allow for expansion at appropriate times. The ARC never saw an appropriate time. And the rub, as I see it now, is applying what was first envisaged in the growth of Auckland in the mid-90s. And I told us one point of land value. As soon as you put a line here, say that's the limit, then the land across the road becomes more valuable, because in New Zealand, you know that in due course you'll be able to break down the opposition and develop that piece of land. And although you're going to pay a high price for it today, in due course you'll get your money back with a decent sort of profit.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. I think it's a great segue to Dushko. So your idea that in fact Auckland is this kind of bigger thing that actually encompasses Whangarei, Hamilton.
The banana, the old banana.
Of course, segues into Professor Bogonovic's unique term for Auckland, the big banana, where Auckland can stretch from Whangarei to Tauranga. And so you're 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, ready then after me?
He's late.
Yeah, not too late.
But he's here.
Yeah, no, radio.
Okay, this is a good point to take over from Bob and kind of look at the bigger picture, the upper North Island, or the northern North Island, which now probably contains about half the New Zealand population. Yeah.
Hamilton North is over half.
Yeah. But before we look at the kind of wider geography picture, I would like to remind you that there is also the history side of this debate, and all of you have seen it, and you cannot miss the debate about urban sprawl, even if you're not an architect or a landscape architect. That debate is part of the general social and political discourse in pretty much all the countries of the world, really. Urban sprawl has become a menace, the menace of the 20th century. And I guess there are very good reasons, and the simplest possible way of describing it is ugly and it's costly. Okay, and people have done very good analysis which have shown how urban sprawl is costing the society enormous amounts of money and waste of resources and huge environmental costs as well. And then generally, we don't like it. Most people don't like it because it does look like you live in this endless kind of suburban urban landscape, never see any nature, and the life in it is pretty dreary and kind of repetitive and monotonous and so on. So on all these very, very valid grounds, urban sprawl has become an evil thing, and as the result of that, pretty much all planning authorities in across the world, developed countries, the planning authorities have developed this, have adopted this policy of containment. When something is bad, evil, you want to contain it, right? You want to stop it from happening. And that, as I said, is justifiable, but in my view has become a bit of an extreme and ideological position recently, because we've kind of almost forgotten what was bad about sprawl originally and how it could have happened differently. And anyway, the forces that shaped urban sprawl in the 20th century are not exactly the same forces which are shaping urban development in our lives in the 21st century. A lot has changed. Where the kind of the whole thing kind of went in a bit of an extremist direction was where containment became generally containment, no urban development as such. All urban development is bad, we don't want any, and everybody is kind of agreeing on this position, and everybody hates development. And because historically development has been tended to be ugly and costly, it seemed to be the right idea, but actually here and there, if you have a better look, there are in fact nice suburbs, there are nice places, there are beautiful cities, there are beautiful towns, and many of them are really kind of suited for the initial context and so on. So, in the overall history of architecture, landscape architecture, we have so many examples of good development. So why would we then say, all development is bad? It's not. It depends how you design it. So this is my historical introduction. I think there's a lot of prejudice now these days in this kind of this philosophy of containment, suppressing urban growth, urban sprawl, urban development, whatever it is. In a paper which will be soon published by Matthew and myself in the Planning Quarterly, we have tried to identify 6 reasons why we think the current vision for the compact city Auckland, why the current vision, the draft Auckland plan, will not work, cannot work. And very quickly, we've said, 1, it's too late. 2nd, wrong geography. 3rd, technology. 4th, sustainability sustainability as an issue. 5, sustainability versus resilience, or the resilience factor rather. And 6, the livability or lifestyle factor. Now I know these words mean nothing to you, so I'll just very briefly explain what we mean. The first one, why it's too late? Well, Auckland is a very young city. Auckland is one of the youngest big cities in the world, along with Perth. And it's kind of, there's the New World, North America, and then there's the New World, which is Australia and New Zealand. And here you find the youngest cities in the world. Other young cities are Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, for example. But they've developed only like 100 years ago, and the last 50 years were all shaped by the car, mostly. So Auckland is a city based on the logic of the car. All location decisions, not all, but most location decisions have been made on the assumption that people have cars and businesses have trucks, and it's all kind of run on the road. So we have to accept that. It's difficult to shape such a city, to change it, transform it radically, and turn it into a European-style city, which needed 300 or 600 years to develop as such. So it's kind of too late for Auckland to argue the case for a compact city. The second reason, which we call the wrong geography, Auckland is in a funny place. I don't need to explain to landscape architecture students what a strange landscape this is. An isthmus, surrounded by water everywhere, volcanic field. It is really a weird place to start a city. But when they did 200 years ago, they didn't kind of realize it was going to be so big. So there are big issues with geography, natural geography, landscape. And in such a landscape, it's really hard to have a literally compact city. The third one is technology. We are witnessing huge changes in technology of everything, technology of transport, technology of information and communication, and environmental technology. For short, ICT, ET, and TT if you're taking notes. ET, environmental technology, not extraterrestrial. Terrestrial technology, in fact. Environmental technology, like, energy stuff, water, waste. ICT or IT, information and communication technology, and transport technology. So these are the 3 realms of technology, 3 families of technologies which are still going through. People say, "Oh, IT revolution that happened and it's over." No, it's still happening. Internet, Facebook, all this stuff. So technology is driving, in fact, further decentralization of cities and lifestyles and business decisions. So it's really hard to argue against that. Keep the city together while, everything in technology is pushing it out. Hard. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying it's hard. The fourth one was sustainability is not all about cars. It has so developed over the last 20, 30 years that urban designers and planners have taken this position that if cities are to become sustainable, then the car is the bad guy. That's not just that. It's also buildings, it's other parts of infrastructure, energy production, and so on. The sustainability of cities, nexus of problems is far more complicated than people driving everywhere. And in any case, cars are kind of cleaning up their act. They're becoming cleaner, smaller, safer, going electric and ta-da-na. 10 years from now, I think we're going to have nice cars, not polluting, and they will be far more expensive to drive and use for business. So you're going to think twice before you go buy milk in the local dairy by car. So I think we will tame the car. The evil car will become Makai. We'll just use it less, shorter distances, and it will be non-polluting. I think this is the future of the car problem. The fifth reason was this sustainability versus resilience position. Long story, but the short of it is people who believe that climate change is already happening and some other environmental issues are saying, actually, we are heading towards enormous changes. They're going to hit us really hard, and it's now more important for cities to adapt rather than mitigate climate change. Or better say, both. We need to mitigate. We have to still continue trying to prevent climate change and other environmental issues as much as possible, but at the same time, some of that, weather stuff and so on will hit us anyway. So we better be prepared. So resilience is now the key word, perhaps even more than sustainability. Resilient cities. So that's kind of changing the whole issue about compactness versus low density, because in fact low density settlements are in some regards more resilient than dense settlements, compact cities. Lastly, the livability or lifestyle factor. If Auckland is going to become one of the best cities to live, then low densities are nice. A lot of our suburbs are really nice, and Auckland is already, one of the best cities in the world to live in. Well, partly because it's low density, there's nature everywhere. So it's not such a bad thing. So see, very simply here, 6 reasons why we are a bit, skeptical about the compact city idea. Moving on, I think...
winding up, let's go.
Sorry, yeah.
Winding up.
Winding up. Basically, we're taking this position. The model of the city of the 21st century is not one where you have black and white. You have urban and non-urban. It is a 4-layered model. You have urban, you have suburban, you have peri-urban, and you have ex-urban. So rather than describing the split as a split between 2 categories, like Auckland, the draft plan used to say 75% of new growth inside the city, 25% outside. We're saying it's not just about these 2 categories, it's actually about 4. And we're also arguing for a different split, roughly even. We think future growth, 1/4 should go in the city, 1/4 should go into the suburbs, new suburbs, another 1/4 should go into the peri-urban area, mostly satellite towns, and the last 1/4 of future growth should go into the ex-area, which is the upper North Island, which is all those Taurangas and Hamiltons and Whangareis and Huntleys and so on. So that's the alternative model we're suggesting. In terms of, what is the proper shape for a city like Auckland on such a strange geographical location? We think actually Auckland should be a linear city. It could reach the length of 100 kilometers by 2050, all the way from Warkworth to down Bombay's or Tokeno. And it already actually does in a way, but we're saying that could be done properly with fast rail, with heavy infrastructure in just this single corridor. The infrastructure is fine of metropolitan Auckland. And then the rest is suburbia with islands of densification and intensification. I'll show you later the map which represents this model.
And then I'll put our paper on Google so you can read it and the paper is the Bible.
So that's the alternative.
That's good. That's very helpful. So thanks very much for that, Rivka. And I'd just like to introduce our last guest and distinguished guest, and that's Brady Nixon. As you all know, New Zealand is run by Australia. The 3 W's, Westpac, Bank, Westfield and Mall, and Woolworths supermarkets. And Brady, you're property manager for...
Yeah, so basically I'm development manager for Recent Enterprises, who is the supermarket chain countdown basically. Who are owned by Woolworths, who are Australian, who take all the profit to Australia and spread it out to all the shareholders. What most people don't actually know about us is that we're actually the largest property developer in New Zealand. So we do on average about $1 billion worth of work every 2 years. So by comparison, Fletcher's does about $280 million worth of development work a year. We're very, very large. So we do this because we are the only ones who really actually understand our own business. So we understand with our supermarkets. We ended up driving development in and around centres and new centres, so we end up developing a lot of centres as a result, and that gives us that sort of gross volume in terms of the dollar value. And the supermarket game is a war, and the only way you really gain market share is you nick sales off your competitors, so you basically are just trying to do it constantly, battling each other by putting more stores on the ground, and strategically where you're actually able to steal trade from the competitor in some way. So that's what we do, that's the reasons why we end up doing a lot of our own development, and then we basically, as a result of being so large and having such a vested interest, we meddle in everything, including town planning and what we think should, we have our own ideas, and Progressive, I get given a very, very long rope to meddle probably further than what Progressive actually would ordinarily be interested in. So that leads me to having taken part in working with Dushko and Connell and David on Auckland Plan and part giving some advice there, and particularly around residential. I've also done a lot of residential development myself, so as everybody did in the past boom, in the past life I developed apartment buildings and so on and so forth. So probably getting back to then where you guys are at, and you guys are considering, as part of your what you're going to be doing this year, isn't it? So looking at development outside of the Mull. I probably would, what I'd like to do is focus on a couple of things, but just one of the things I wanted to draw your attention to in terms of Auckland and why Auckland itself is a very, very difficult place is that Auckland is effectively the amalgamation of a whole lot of places over time, and so when you actually consider Auckland was effectively, back in the 80s, was 27 borough councils who all grew into each other. You've got basically all these different towns and centres and borough councils that have all had their own objectives, and places grown and banged into each other, and a large urban form has actually developed up. So there hasn't been any sort of real cohesive kind of design to the centre. There's nobody thought about how big it was ever going to be, and what the guys at the council have got to deal with now is effectively looking at how they can actually plan the city and how you can actually retrospectively refit Auckland. And that is a very, very tough thing to achieve, because most places in the world, the only places where that hasn't been achieved is where there's been wars or natural disasters, or somewhere where they've actually been given the opportunity to have a blank canvas, or in places like, say, Sydney or Melbourne, where absolutely vast amounts of bare land actually existed inside their mulls, and so the opportunities were actually relatively easy for them in that sense. So Auckland's got some very, very unique aspects to it, some very constrained aspects to it. It's a very largely built out city, so what is it does exist has pretty much predominantly got built form on it, and so it limits your responses and what you can actually do, and you're very, very largely dependent on everybody participating in that process, including not just the developers, councils, but people owning their own homes, landowners and so on. And it's a very, very tough thing. It's like herding cats essentially to coordinate all of those and actually get everybody on board. So the opportunities that are actually there for council, on one hand you could argue that they're limited, but also quite good. And so then when you get to the debate around the compact form versus growth, personally myself, I think just the continuation and proliferation of what we've actually been building, which is bog standard brick and tile houses, endlessly going on, is it's not really going to work. It doesn't look good anyway. It doesn't work. There's no sort of real cohesive way that our suburbs meld into each other. They've all seem to got their own form. It just seems to be a real kind of a jumble, and it doesn't really work. And it is expensive, and that's placing a lot of strain on Auckland when it comes to going back and retrospectively fixing infrastructure, so it does wear out. It does need to be replaced, and who's going to replace it and pay for all those things. And so planning Auckland is a tough thing. In terms of where the Auckland plan is now, I don't think my view is that it's there's a good balance there. There's going to be some greenfield that actually be allowed, and there's going to be overall a theme and a leaning towards a compact city. Personally myself, I think probably the density levels that the council are looking for won't be achieved because it relies heavily on apartments, and apartments are very, very difficult to sell, very, very difficult to build, and they're very expensive, and very few people do them. Very few people actually have the resources available to them to actually get out there and actually do it. And I'll give you an example. The Housing Affordability report by the Productivity Commission that came out last year identified that roughly in Auckland there were only 30 individuals or businesses developing over 100 units per annum. I think it was even less than that, might have been over 30. So when you look at New Zealand, you look at Auckland, the predominance of people who are actually doing building work in the city is sole traders. They are builders. They might have 1 or 2 staff. They've got very limited resources. Probably don't have the desire really to do a heck of a lot. They're making enough money to do what they want to do, so they're happy. And those are the people who actually shape our city. So they're not going to just suddenly change and actually start upskilling and and building larger buildings and doing density. It's a very difficult thing to do. There are other issues that actually restrain it. I like the way the banks actually view apartments. They don't particularly like them, so they require large deposits. So when we then go to look at Auckland and how it's actually going to be planned out in the future, and particularly as a developer, I look at the type of products that I think can be delivered that actually take into consideration all the things that make up our marketplace. So the sole traders who build 1 or 2 dwellings a year, might only have a few staff. It's about how we can actually use those guys and what kind of product can they actually realistically develop. And without having to have these massive fundamental changes in the way that our industry works and how it's resourced, what can people actually afford to buy? So, the reality is most of us are going to either be on salaries, are not going to be splitting these. We're not going to be able to have really expensive apartments. Big apartments are very expensive. They cost millions and millions of dollars. So, what exists that puts everything in a price bracket and within a range that every other person can afford to actually own. So my view is a leaning towards compact form, but at a lower density level being more orientated around terrace houses and what the Americans would call townhouses, and doing that in a fee simple manner, so that you end up with a titling system that's no different to a regular house. You own the land underneath it. You don't pay body corporates because you're not joined to the building next to you, but the built form itself presents itself in a more sort of compact form. The human scale is a bit larger, and we deviate away from what we've been doing, which is building traditional houses on ever-decreasing small sites. So where that then leads us to is a really great opportunity, because with Greenfield we actually have an opportunity to set standards and redefine what the way that we're actually living. And if we look at Greenfield locations, many of these the opportunities that exist are not for there to be just more houses getting built like we actually have been doing in the past, but to redefine what those actual houses look like. Maybe there's more terrace houses, and then that allows there to be standards set that are exemplary, that then mean that when you then come back to the hard stuff, which is the retrospective refitting of Auckland, and when you're actually looking for the clear examples, and you're looking for the market to embrace it, and looking for people who want to live in it, there's already examples set. We've set a tone for things, we've set a tone for the density, we've set a tone for the way that we actually live. And we haven't fundamentally taken away from the things that people want, the space that they want, the ability to have some kind of yard, the ability to afford things, houses, and we can just be a bit more clever about it. And I also think that going outside of the mall is giving some really great opportunities around, again, achieving similar sort of objectives like that when it comes to small towns. And I think you're going to see a lot more satellites in small towns actually come up, and they'll be very well master planned places, and if they're done right, they can actually be really great outcomes where you can use very small amounts of land, but actually have a lot of people living there, and it can work quite well. So I think certainly from the point of view where you guys are going to be going, given that you're dealing with landscape, and bringing it back to you guys so that you can actually understand how that may relate to what the work you're going to be doing, is just about all these places are going to need some kind of amenity that's actually going to attract the market to them. And it's about understanding, firstly, what built form might actually be, but then building them around it, the amenity, the place, and doing it in a cost-effective manner so it's not expensive, but at the same time makes it a very desirable place to live. And a lot of you guys may in the future end up defining what that actually is. And and it's going to be really important for you to understand holistically how the industry works, holistically what the goals and objectives for council are, and actually try to be clever about it, think outside the box, and start thinking about how you can actually meld ideas and come up with new built form, come up with new ways to present places and make them attractive and make them places that people actually want to live, so that they actually happen, and then some good examples are actually built over time, and hopefully then our city will get redeveloped from the outside in. I agree with Dushko about the car. I think the unfortunate thing is we've got a love of cars worldwide. I think the car industry is not going to fall over and die. They're certainly not going to die for public transport. They'll clean their act up over time, and I think that they're under no pressure to do so, which makes it difficult. But certainly the technology is there and it's emerging around electric technology, and there's probably a high chance that we'll embrace that and continue to use cars. So I think cars are always going to be a major part of life, and I don't see that changes. The oil's not running out. My father's quite significant in the oil industry, and there's more oil out there than you can shake a stick at, so it's not going to run out. So there are some, it's got a long life to go in it. So public transport plays a part, but because the car always been the dominant, it's going to be very hard to make these things stack up financially, and they're going to always be placed in fiddle. They'll have their part, but they'll never be mainstream mode of transport. This is my opinion. Don't forget that on the way through, people have to actually work somewhere, and so there's more than just where people live and how they live and what they live in. I think that we actually need to understand how we can plan industry in and around these sort of locations and get it to work better, more cohesively with residential. It's always been a very difficult thing to have. How do you actually get residential to exist next to industrial suburbs and everybody to be happy? Well, we actually need them to be as close as we can so that there's less distance for people travelling. If everybody's going to use their cars, great, let's make them actually travel shorter distances. They're not carting themselves halfway across Auckland, which is actually the case. Classic example, 60% of all people going south over the Auckland Harbour Bridge in the morning are going from the North Shore to East Tamaki to work. So that's a vast number of people who are moving from one side of the city to the other. But because the industry isn't particularly well planned as it sits as an overall city, and so people don't have any choice. So think about that industry, think about what places where people are going to work, and actually how we can actually get that to work better, and then what that actually might look like. That might mean that industrial buildings might have to change the way that they actually present themselves instead of big tin sheds and ugly hurricane wire surrounded compounds. Maybe that actually we might look to more Victorian style of buildings, like the old brownstone Victorian warehousing and so on. And that then does also lead on to what I like to think of as adaptability. And one of the worst things we do in our city, in New Zealand and in the Western world, is that when we do build houses and buildings, they have one use. You can't actually adapt them, you can't change them, you can't use them for other things. And if we go to places like New York, a lot of New York is retrospectively and adaptively changed from being maybe Victorian industrial buildings into your blocks, so you end up having these future uses, and it's about actually looking at the way we actually do things and actually building better, so that some of our industrial buildings, for instance, can be have a future life. They don't have to be bowled over to make way for things. Maybe building our houses in a more cohesive manner in terms of the materials we build them out of, so that instead of just building a standalone house that's got timber floors and just like cladding on the outside, maybe it has got heavy duty cladding, maybe it has got concrete floors, so that in the future the small sole traders and the small business guys coming along with the mums and dads looking to improve their investment opportunities might have to go along to that house and actually go, great, the bones of there are really good, I'm going to split that now into 2 apartments, and suddenly we get the opportunities to increase the density, get additional uses in the future out of the type of housing we're doing, and at marginal cost. I mean, the reality is when you build a house and put a concrete floor, and you're only talking about 6 or 7 grand difference in cost between a timber floor, so we're not talking a lot of money, but we're just not thinking about it, and we're not having industry who thinks about it, and we need to start to look at those sort of ideas. And that's pretty much about it, actually. So,
perfect.
Is there anything else you want me to say?
No, that's good. That's good. So we've got about 10 minutes left to questions. Not 30. Yeah, so thank you, and thank you for your very interesting comments and ideas, and I'll throw the floor open and questions from students. Yeah.
David, so you're saying you're open to creative ideas and things to go outside the boundary. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the land between the satellite and the thing. So what's going to be the process for come up with some creative solution for some area? Is it going to be a resource consent type process to?
So there's a number of planning processes that are sort of starting to gather steam, because while obviously first cap off the rank is the Auckland plan, which tries to grapple with the big scale, we've got to then make sure that there's a whole lot of things happening at different scales. How do we get that finer grain sense of what are the outcomes? And you know, I think particularly at the margins, not, I mean, sort of like the whole, but particularly at the margins of the urban area and the space between urban areas, I think landscape, you know, should be landscape driven in my view. We should be responding to the land, we should be responding to the values of the land and the history of land use and all those things that make up existing places across Auckland, all those fantastic sort of things that we sort of know about, but we sometimes have trouble describing. We've got to grapple with that stuff, and whatever we do in terms of allowing change, we've got to be responding to those values. We've got to be doing it in a way that involves local communities, so the local boards have a really important role now. They're a little bit closer to what's happening on the ground in the previous cities and district councils were. Hopefully more in touch with their actual communities.
So local councils will have more power to say allow something that might not be.
Local boards will have, so they won't necessarily have power to make the big decisions, but they'll be involved. They have to be involved in decisions at a local scale. There's a process. I'm not responsible for it, but there's a process we call area spatial planning. So it's almost like spatial planning at a smaller scale or a more local scale. So I guess that's picking up on some of the principles and traditions around spatial planning being a more holistic process than some of the previous really RMA-driven sort of processes that we had in previous councils. Spatial planning is a set of principles which tries to bring a whole range of ideas together, initially at a broad scale. There's also been that sort of philosophy that's been worked into methodology for how we do planning at a small scale. So these area spatial plans will be a way of getting down to a kind of grain, not just within urban areas, but across the whole region, that allows us to get a more realistic picture of what's actually likely to happen in particular places around Auckland. And within that, what do we think are the degrees of change or the opportunities that individuals with their own property or businesses or whatever can actually work with? It's sort of like a finer grained framework. You need a framework that you can operate in. People need to know how much flexibility do I have in terms of making decisions for my own business, for my own property, for my own family, and that really is where the creative comes in. We want to maximise those opportunities. We don't want to be overly bureaucratic, but I don't have the full answer to that question in terms of what's actually going to look like. But we're very open-minded about how it might happen. So we
an area that you were wanting to put some development on because that area ecologically was going to regard you haven't actually sorted out how you would have.
Look at these areas for significant new greenfield development. We've called them areas for investigation because there's no way that in the year and a bit that we've had that we could come up with a good plan for these areas. We need to essentially say these are the areas that we're prepared to look at for significant change, through a kind of urban level of change, and then sort of unleash a whole lot of creative energy to make sure we do that really, really well. So it's really, that's sort of like one of the critical steps in implementing the Auckland plan is to figure out how we actually do those investigations. And I think it's, landscape has to be a really important part of that. These are really important places. We're not just saying, oh, this is the low-hanging fruit, these are the places that don't matter where they're grown. These are really important places already. And we've got to really respect them. And we've got to work with those communities. We've got to bring in a whole range of different professions and disciplines and really figure it out as a really creative process. It's not just a planning process, it's a community process.
Can I emphasize that point about landscape, because obviously for this audience that's a particularly important point. There are cities with strong landscapes and weak landscapes. And some of the most beautiful cities in the world are actually in places which landscape-wise are pretty boring. Can you think of one? One obviously, like Diana's Bay, Paris. Is there much landscape there? Not in terms of natural geography, not much. The river and pretty much almost a flat plain. But, over history, the French have managed to build one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Auckland is the other thing. Auckland is one of the cities that is kind of drowning in landscape and nature, like Cape Town or Rio de Janeiro, or Edinburgh. These are the cities which have very powerful landscapes. So in Auckland, indeed, any planning philosophy should be heavily kind of imbued and inspired by the natural landscape.
And we actually also need to be allowing ourselves to live in the nice places. I mean, people actually live day to day. You can't have all the good landscape out there and the place where you live in being the low quality environment. I mean, the whole nature of good growth is it having quality, and quality means amenity, and therefore it also means having some nice landscape to start off with. But, how do we live well in our good landscape is the question, and how do we grow well in the good parts of our landscape, and not just shove everybody down in those sort of flats of copper or somewhere where doesn't really matter, does it? Nobody wants to live there.
I think too, when you come to your designs, you're looking at the landscape, you also need to be sympathetic to the history or the bones of what created the city. It's interesting listening to sort of all the people commenting, and Grishko and Brady in particular, talking about the history of cars and motorways because Auckland's such a new city. Think about Paris. Think about the Champs-Élysées. Hands up, how many people have been to Paris? You've seen the Champs-Élysées, a few of you have. And it's insanely great. It's beautiful, this huge broad road, all these funky boutiques and things, and it's just one of the most beautiful streets in the world. Why? It's simple. The entire history of Paris is always plagued with riots. The peasants would revolt, they'd come in, they'd chop heads off kings and generally create mischief. The entire boulevard is a great huge wide boulevard, so an entire squadron of cavalry can move straight down from the barracks of the first Chasseur de Garde, right up the end, and clean the whole area right through the Tuileries Gardens, all the way down to protect the Royal Palace. That's the only reason. That's the history of why you've got these funky boutiques, so you can slaughter people efficiently. History is a very interesting thing. That's the bones of the city that created it. If you don't kind of realise what the hell's going on there, it's... I did my degrees at the University of Canterbury. That was developed in the 1960s and 70s. In Paris in 1968, there were terrible student riots where, everyone got up and rioted, wanted to smash the state and all good stuff, all marvellous stuff. My old university in Christchurch, you walk through it, there's huge, ugly concrete walls around the registry office and around the High Library and so on. And people like Rachel, from an urban design point of view, said there'll be no active edges in there, and it is actually, it's a lovely campus, lots of trees, but these are bloody ugly buildings. It's a technical architecture word. Bloody ugly buildings. And why? Because it was designed straight after the student riots in 1968. It was designed to get water cannons in there to clean the students out. That was the rationale for the design of the University of Canterbury. History teaches an awful lot about place and design, I suggest, ladies and gentlemen. I just thought I'd throw that in the shit fun.
No, but I think it's a good point. In fact, Auckland does have this weird combination. It has a fantastic landscape, but actually the infrastructure of Auckland is dribbled about, and of course
One other, if I just a quick comment on the cars one, and Brady and Dushka are both quite bold and out there in terms of cars. One thing's interesting, the Property Council, we belong to an organisation in the United States called BOMAR International Building Owners and Managers. And I was there a couple of years ago. One of the interesting discussions about sustainability for them was how do we cope with cars? And the big issue is how we retrofit buildings to put the photovoltaic cells, the big cells putting up the sun that generate power, because we're going to have to, in 50 years' time, we'll be recharging cars at work, and we need to get electricity from the sun with cabling in through those buildings, because the future is cars, they're electric cars, and they're going to be powered by the sun. And that's the discussion that we're having in Washington, D.C. Now, I thought that was kind of insanely out there, but it's a sort of conversation that certainly large owners and investors like Brookfields and things are starting to talk about in North America now. The future's another world. We can't predict it, but we can get glimmers of it. And I think we must not underrate the future of electricity and electric cars.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up pretty quickly. Any other questions for our panel? Future of Auckland? Here we go. What landscapes and play in it?
But Matthew, maybe we can just try to make some kind of a connection to the studio then after this discussion. And I would say, you know, you really have a fantastic assignment here to prove this hypothesis that Auckland could grow outside of the metropolitan urban limits, but not create more sprawl, something different, a different model of development out there in the peri-urban belt, which is sustainable, resilient, affordable, livable, you know, prosperous. So you got a fantastic assignment. You can prove that then, you know, we will prove the case that Auckland can grow, you know, in some locations horizontally as well, and we'll be fine because we now have better design ideas and so on than before.
Yeah, I can see how. I mean, this is a great opportunity for you guys. I mean, no one has really thought about this. I mean, you guys are. This is you guys are coming up with some kind of idea, some kind of investigation, and we're all really, really interested in seeing what you come up with. Possibilities what you come up with.
One thing that we might have heard about is this idea of an Auckland design compendium, which is intended to be a sort of a repository for all sorts of great design ideas that are appropriate for Auckland. And I think, you know, it's something you should think about how we get a chance to contribute to that, because I think we need to really get into that, not just ideas about buildings, but all sorts of spaces, urban, rural, whatever. We need to make sure that design compendium is rich and broad.
And I would add that you know, the knowledge that you guys have, that you guys need to build up around buildings and ideas for buildings is going to be important, because they are what we actually live in, and then the spaces that you guys are going to design are going to exist around them. It's about coming up with, you know, really great ideas that then will enrich those different typologies in terms of buildings and the way that industrial and residential and so on is actually presented. So, you know, the richness of the place in terms of the quality of it is going to be absolutely fundamental if we're going to get it right, because we don't. And they look, you know, you can build the best buildings in the world, but if the place looks like shit, nobody's going to go live there.
It's a true thing.
Yeah.
Rachel, any more last words?
Well, I think I come back to that, you know, demographics is what word is the word?
Demographics is destiny.
Yeah, because I think, you know, the other side of places is all about people, and it's kind of like, you know, in 30 years, how do we want to be living in the sort of places that will be Auckland? And, you know, that's also a key driver. Auckland's changed a lot. You know, I've been here for 20 years, and I think the way Aucklanders think about Auckland has changed a huge amount. Our focus on quality has changed a huge amount, and, you know, in another 20 years when you're sitting here, it's going to be different again. So how do we inform that in a way that actually does turn Auckland around a bit? Because this is the moment in time when those decisions are being made.
Yeah, really important moment.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you on that, Rachel. And I'd just like to thank